A very good evening to everyone present here. I hope I'm audible. So if there is any disturbance in my voice or in the video, please do intimate us. So we will begin our live session today. Thank you so much for joining with us on this live session on COVID-19 pandemic and the vaccines. So today we have with us one of the most inevitable persons in the field of microbiology, Dr. Devasena Radhakrishnan. Dr. Devasena Radhakrishnan is the professor and the head of microbiology department in Oman Durar Medical College, Chennai. Ma'am has also worked in several other eminent institutions like Keelcock Medical College, Vellore Medical College, Madras Medical College, and the Chengalpet Medical College. Her interest and contribution towards the subject is magnanimous, which is very evident from her works and talks. To name one out of so many outstanding works of her, the pneumococcal conjugate vaccine 10 and 13 under the Johns Hopkins project and the ICMR, which was later accepted by the Pfizer group of companies. Ma'am has been always warm and welcoming to everyone and is such a humble person in nature. It's an honor and a privilege that Ma'am has accepted our invitation for this live session today. With no further delay, let's welcome Professor Dr. Devasena Radhakrishnan among us to untangle the knots about the current scenario of COVID and to detail us about the vaccines that are available for the virus. Good evening, ma'am. It's so warm to have you with us today.
Good evening, Karthik, and good evening, everyone. I'm really happy about the way Karthik introduced me. This was a great introduction. Thanks so much.
Thank you,
And
ma'am.
let's start the session as you all wish. Thank you. Let's begin.
Yes, yes, ma'am. So it has been a year since the pandemic started. There were so many conspiracies, so many myths, so many news, so many people got infected, and so many people even left their life. All of us were locked in our rooms with our face and mouth covered with masks and were waiting for some solution to end this virus. Finally, like a candle which was lit in a dark room, we got light in form of vaccine. When the entire world was happy and relaxed, again the media were discouraging people from stop taking the vaccine. People began to shun again. On the other hand, the virus also steadily raised, and this time more faster and stronger. So, is there any way to escape from this virus? Is it safe to get vaccinated? To clear all our questions and to get us rid from our anxiety, we have ma'am with us today. So, moving on to today's session, ma'am. So, the first question is about the basic structure. So, could you
Yeah.
please explain to us about the morphology of the virus and the way by which it gets transmitted from one person to another?
Sure. This virus is such a complex virus. It's basically it belongs to the group beta coronavirus. So we have plenty of coronavirus under the family Coronaviridae. So this comes under the beta coronavirus family. So the other coronaviruses, along with this COVID virus 19, that is the SARS-CoV-2 virus, is our MERS and our SARS-CoV-1 virus. This beta coronavirus initially was supposed to just cause cough and cold with incubation period of 2 to 5 days, and it was not given much importance, and it used to go on its own. But this SARS-CoV-2 has got a complex structure wherein it is actually a single sense RNA virus. It's an enveloped virus with multiple spikes on it. So it has a major important part, that is the lipid envelope. This lipid envelope is also a fragile part of the virus. Hence, this part becomes very easily destroyable by just washing our hands with soap and water, also with hand sanitizer. That's the advantage. But as such, compared to other RNA virus, this is going to be a very complex structure. So it has a very important mRNA inside it, the single stranded RNA. Then it has a envelope gene. On the surface of the envelope, we have multiple spikes. These spikes, they even resemble the spikes of HIV virus. So they were confused with the glycoprotein spikes also initially, but there are too many in number, and these spikes have the ability to attach with our angiotensin receptor sites, that is AC angiotensin converting enzyme receptor sites. So that is how it enters and binds to these receptors in our lungs, kidney, and heart, and it multiplies. So just this virus can settle on our hand, it can settle on our droplets, can settle on the fomites, any surfaces. So easily it can spread from person to person because of its structure. It has the ability to bind and multiply very rapidly. So the glycoprotein spikes, they initially thought they had a property of like HIV virus, so they started even the treating of this coronavirus infection with anti-HIV drugs. So such is the structure. And so coming to the next thing, how it spreads to droplet infection and then spreads from person to person. But this virus was first identified in Wuhan, in the city of China, Wuhan city in the country, China country, and this had spread from animals in fish market or seafood market. This was supposed to have spread through bats. But then from bats to human being, then the human to human spread was the most popular one. Initially, they had cluster of pneumonias in this Wuhan city of China in the sea market. Then they found out the reason for this was the beta coronavirus, which earlier was causing only cough and cold, and also the SARS pandemic in 2002 and the MERS pandemic in 2012. But then the SARS pandemic in COVID-1, it is that pandemic was caused by the civet cats, whereas in 2012 it was called as the MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, and that also caused pneumonia-like symptoms. But the reason was the spread was and then initially it was a minor pandemic. It was not very disturbable or destructible, but it was limited to certain countries as epidemic also. But this spread wild like a wildfire in March. On March 11, 2020, WHO had declared this SARS-CoV-2 infection as a pandemic one. Then it started spreading from person to person all over the world, and simultaneously, as the word pandemic suggests, this existed simultaneously in many parts of the world. So if you see this structure, this transmission to cough to droplets, and from the surfaces, it spreads from person to person, and there's initially the person had only fever, they presented with fever, sore throat, and myalgia, and then it led on to COVID pneumonia. And this nowadays they have atypical presentation like joint stiffness and pain in the joints, and then the spread they even spread through the fecal matter. They had diarrhea, so the atypical presentation. But though the main pathology underlying this is the formation of microthrombi or the hypercoagulable state. That is because the ACE receptors binds to this spike protein and it multiplies into enormous amount. The severe viremia, it can spread to all the organs, leading on to multi-dysfunction syndrome or multi-organ failure, or it can also lead on to kidney failure as such, or it can give a stroke-like thing if it is affecting our brain, if the microthrombi is the blood capillaries of the brain, or it can even affect the heart causing coronary spasm. So when that is why they said that wearing of mask, hand washing, and maintaining social distance could prevent the spread of the disease. So this is about the introduction to coronavirus. But then these coronaviruses, they mutate, and there are a number of strains are found to be very different nowadays. The initial strain, for that we have vaccines and other protective measures. For the newly mutated strain also, the vaccines would work. But then we have plenty of the newly mutated strains which could spread the disease very rapidly in a virulent state, and that is more important. That's why the contact with people or the social distancing should be always avoided. So coming on to the next slide. So you can see how various organs are being affected. So if there's a mild infection, and like you say, like anything can be presented to the antigen presenting cells, and these T cells, they stimulate the B cells to form antibodies. So similarly here also there's formation of antibodies, IgM and IgG. So this formation of IgG antibodies, then they'll have protection against this disease that can last for 6 to 8 months. It cannot last lifelong. Any infection, so once you get this infection, the immunity can be lifelong, but here it is not so. So you can see this attachment to the effector cells, dendritic cells, and macrophages. That's how it's being processed, and then these antigen presenting cells or the that AC receptors are also present in the kidney, can elsewhere also, like in the heart, apart from your lungs. So these multiply in enormous amount, and they cause what is known as the inflammation, that is known as the cytokine storm. The incubation period is between 2 to 14 days, but the cytokine storm produced by these inflammatory cells, the pro-inflammatory cells, that is being induced by these viruses, is it's the most dangerous stage. This cytokine storm is induced by our IL-6. So what happens here? At the same time, there's activation of these IL-6 cells, and our ferritin levels goes high. This formation of thrombus formation is there, fibrinogen formation is there. So there is disseminated intravascular coagulation, blocking the capillaries of all, I mean, almost all the blood vessels of all the organs are being blocked by this, and the blood circulation is lost, hence the organ failure occurs. So if it is in case of lungs, then the COVID pneumonia, where you can see the ground glass opacity in your X-rays, that when we talk about investigations, we'll show the picture also. So the inflammatory cells, the inflammatory markers are very, very important here to assess the prognosis of the disease. Some of them, they just remain as asymptomatic carriers, and some of them with comorbidities and depressed immune system, they have severe viral load, and they have the end organ damage also. So we always think of the COVID pneumonia, that's very common, which presents as acute respiratory distress syndrome, or like a pneumonia, severe pneumonia. But we always should think of the other possible ways of presentation, like if it is going to attack the blood vessels, like the blood vessels of the heart is being blocked, there's cardiac arrest, blood vessels of the kidney is being blocked, there's going to be kidney failure. And in our brains, we are going to, if it is going to block the capillaries in the brain, there could be seizures. So these are the various presentations also of COVID. So it can be simply protected by the good olden days. I mean, like the simple practice of hand washing, and wearing the mask, and maintaining the social distance. Also, this mask should be disposed properly, because these can carry the infection. Our fomites, our clothes, use of disinfectants on the surface. So all these things should be followed to destroy the virus. As I told you, it's a lipid envelope virus, so it is easily destroyable. Also, that's the advantage also. So next slide. So these are the most common symptoms, as I told you: dry cough, fever, chills, and tiredness, headache, aches and pain. Initially, for the last 1 year, everybody have presented with these types of symptoms. But now the COVID presentation is slightly different. They have just myalgia and joint stiffness and joint pain. So we not classify that it has to come under, like they have to have these symptoms of fever, cough, or sore throat. So these presentations also common. Like history of contact with COVID patients will give you a clear picture also. And most of them will be asymptomatic carriers unless we go in for the investigations. So that is being, there are very important investigations done to diagnose COVID, like our microbiological test. Like main thing is our RT-PCR, antigen detection, antibodies detection, and then we have the radio diagnosis, methods of detection, and the other inflammatory markers. Pro-inflammatory markers are also being investigated for the prognosis of the disease.
So, yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. So, shall we move to the next question, ma'am?
Yeah, next question, please, Karthik.
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, as you said, clinical features vary from person to person. In fact, the symptoms the patient presented initially at the beginning of the pandemic is completely different from the symptoms currently the patients are presenting to a doctor with. So, ma'am,
Exactly.
when shall we suspect a person is COVID positive, or is there any pathognomic symptoms with which we can say the person is definitely positive for the disease?
Yeah, that's right. So if you suspect the patient is going to have, is suffering from COVID with the various symptoms, and if he comes from area where there are plenty of COVID cases, then nasopharyngeal swab and oropharyngeal swab for the antigen detection by RT-PCR method could be the best choice. Because if you wait for the antibodies to be formed, the IgM antibodies during the infection, or the IgG, it will take more than 2 weeks to 3 weeks. So you can't wait till that time. So during the second or third day of the infection, we would like to test for the antigen. If the person is going to carry that infection, he is definitely going to harbor that antigen in his nasopharynx and oropharynx. So this swab, which is made up of a Dacron mesh or it's a charcoal material swab. The main thing is it's a Dacron swab or a nylon swab. These swabs are of two different types. One is for oropharyngeal swab, one is for nasopharyngeal swab swabbing, and this can be swabs can be taken and it can be inoculated in viral transport media. So there's a specific viral transport media for this, and then this can be taken for our RT-PCR testing. So in RT-PCR also, we have all the general steps of RT-PCR, and we have the primers and probes. Then you have the initial phase, yes, denaturation, annealing, and extension, and then amplification. So we have all these specimens, and we have to do what is known as the RNA extraction. That's the first method. We have a RNA extractor. We have either the manual method or an automated extractor. Then amplification is done by PCR. It is done by the probes and primers that is suitable to amplify the particular DNA from this RNA, and then we have to interpret the results. The presence of viral RNA indicates the active SARS-CoV-2 infection. Yes, but the cycles, the threshold cycles are very important. So when we amplify this, and if the RNA is going to be present within that 15 to 20, then we say the CT values are very high. That is, the viral load is very high, and the CT values are normal. It's not high, it's very normal. And about 30 to 35, CT values might be high, but the viral load will be low. That is how we read and interpret the results. So this we have specific primers and probes for this RNA in particular that different companies give different names for this. Then this entire test takes about 2 to 2.5 hours. That's all. But 72 samples can be tested in a given single time. There are other tests also apart from this RT-PCR, but they can be like point of source testing. There is a Gene Expert study. It is called as the CBNAT, and then it is a cartridge-based nucleic acid amplification test, and that's a very simple test. It detects the E gene, that's the envelope gene, and then this it's confirmed by the nucleocapsid gene detection in the second method. So the basic principle is the same as your RT-PCR, but it's like a point of source test and a point of care test. It is very simple, and then it takes only 45 minutes to 1 hour. But the thing is, you can only screen 7 samples at a given time. And there's another test called TrueNAT. It's a chip-based test that also utilizes this basic principle of RT-PCR. It detects the E gene, and then it is confirmed by the detection of RNA-dependent RNA polymerase. So even that uses the simple principle of RT-PCR, but both of them can detect only 78 samples at a given time. So it is very important at bedside testing. Bedside testing, it can be like point of care testing. It can be used, but still the most reliable test is our RT-PCR test for antigen detection. Then there's also called as one immunochromatographic test where it can detect IgM and IgG antibodies, and that is useful once the antibodies are formed. But for antigen detection also, like SARS-CoV-2, initially they formed this immunochromatographic test, but then it has to be confirmed with RT-PCR. That's the thing. And the other test, the radio diagnostics test. So sometimes RT-PCR will be negative, but the patient presents with COVID pneumonia, he'll have that ground glass opacity appearance in his uh, X-rays. So this is a picture of Gene Expert, what I was talking about. Our, it has to same nasopharyngeal swab or the sputum or the oropharyngeal swab is taken, and this Gene Expert is the cartridge-based test, and these are the different steps where you can see. But then again, we have the same principle of our RT-PCR. So sample is automatically filtered and washed after that transfer of 2 ml whatever sample, and then you have to have the same lysis, and then you have the DNA molecules are mixed with the PCR reagents, the primers and probes, something like that. The reagents are similar, and then you have the different lines of reading like a cycle threshold value. It's a very, very important and simple test. But then our reliable test is RT-PCR. The other test, other investigations apart from this antigen detection will be our ELISA test. This detects the IgM and IgG antibodies. These are very, very important. The IgM antibodies are formed 2 to 14, that is 2 weeks to 3 weeks after the infection, whereas IgG antibodies are almost permanent, formed after 3 weeks after infection, till 8 months. So, a simple ELISA method is used to detect this COVID IgG antibodies to see if we have protective antibodies against COVID. Similarly, after vaccination, also people get tested for this COVID antibodies. And then we have the other radio diagnosis test, where we would like to see the ground glass opacity as a very diagnostic and confirmatory thing if the RT-PCR test becomes negative in a patient. Also, we have the other tests like inflammatory markers or the ones which are responsible for cytokine formation. And I think we had to go for the next slide for that. So, this was the test I was talking about. The TrueNAT test is a chip-based battery-operated RT-PCR test kit. Initially, it could only identify the E gene in the SARS-CoV-2. So it was used as a screening test. Then, only after detecting the envelope gene, we had to go and confirm the presence of RDRP. That is the RNA-dependent RNA polymerase enzyme bound to the virus. So this will be the confirmation test. This is the TrueNAT. So those two are the popular tests also, CB-NAT and TrueNAT tests. Next slide. So this was the immunochromatographic test I was talking about. So simultaneously, you can detect the COVID-19 IgM antibodies, IgG antibodies, and you can also have come to conclusion that person has suffered from the infection. Now he has started developing the protective IgG antibodies. Then these are the very important but easily available ones. But then we had our own restraints or we thought this has to be again confirmed by ELISA if the antibodies are formed. So it requires a second test. So it's a very important test. It can be done in airports or in a mass when you're doing a mass survey. These type of tests are also very, very useful.
Thank you, ma'am. So moving on to the next question.
Yeah.
Ma'am, so we spoke about the symptoms, and we spoke about how we go on about diagnosing a patient.
Yeah.
So from what we understand is lung involvement in the patient with COVID.
Yeah.
So how serious is lung involvement, ma'am? Like do we have any grading system for that, or how do we
Yeah,
say
exactly.
lungs is more?
Exactly. Yeah. This thank you for this question. This lung involvement, that is the most important feature of this COVID, that is the COVID pneumonia, or we call it as acute respiratory distress syndrome, ARDS, due to COVID, but ultimately it is the COVID pneumonia. So here there's a difference, grading system. When you look at the X-ray of these lungs, you can see the ground glass opacity. So they have like 20% lung involvement, 40%, 60% grade 1, 2, 3 till 5. So they give it a score rad, that is COVID radio diagnosis, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 20%, 40, 60, 80, and 100. So the greater the grading, greater the lung involvement, the severity of the disease is indicated. Sometimes what happens, the RT-PCR might be negative, but there'll be plenty of lung involvement. Then also we have to confirm it as COVID only and repeat the RT-PCR test. RT-PCR can become negative due to so many reasons: improper sample collection, or delay in transporting, or delay in testing, or the improper maintenance of the temperature. So we cannot rely only on the RT-PCR test at times. So we always ask the patient to undergo a CT scan or an X-ray lung should be taken, and the grading system is very, very important for the prognosis. Depending on this only, we have to decide whether the patient needs any oxygen, oxygen assistance or oxygen supply, maybe HFNC or CPAP or a ventilator. Based on this grading, they decide how much of oxygen saturation the patient has and how much of oxygen the patient requires and how much oxygen supply we should be giving the patient through what methods. So this is very, very important. The survival rate of the patient, prognosis, and the recovery always depends on the radio diagnosis. And this is the lungs have been affected because of the inflammatory markers, like a lot of cytokine storm that has been produced by our IL-6. The basis of this is again hypercoagulability of the blood, that is microclot formation in the blood vessels of the lungs. Because of the lack of blood supply to the alveoli and other integral part of the lung, it gets fibrous, it stops functioning. That is the basis pathology. Like these microclots, they block the normal blood circulation in the lungs, and the lungs gets fibrous. Like you said, depends on the severity of the grading. The fibrosis also has been, it's directly proportional. So this hypercoagulability can be stopped by, because this is because again of dehydration and the presence of lot of fibrin in the blood circulation, the clot formation occurs. To prevent this, the patient should be hydrated well, and anti-inflammatory treatment like steroids should be started. So for all these things, this lung X-ray and CT scan of the lung is a must. CT of the lung is a must for grading.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. So, moving on to the next question, ma'am, what are the markers which can be used to find out that the person was suffering from COVID, ma'am? Like, are they useful just for finding the COVID, or can we also use it as a retrospective diagnosis also, ma'am?
Very good question. They are also used to identify the COVID infection along with your RT-PCR test, as well as your CT lung or CT scan of the lung or X-ray of the lung. But
Ma'am, do we
these are the
regularly do
markers.
it, ma'am? With
Yeah, we have
RT-PCR?
to
Do we
regularly
regularly
do
do
it.
it, ma'am?
Exactly. Once the patient is COVID positive, you have to immediately send the samples to the biochemistry department to know the status of the patient, or we should know whether the patient is undergoing the cytokine storm between the 5th to 10th day
Yes.
of infection. The
Okay.
earlier we
Okay.
diagnose this, or the earlier we know about the status of the patient regarding the inflammatory markers which are responsible for this cytokine storm, we can act accordingly or treat the patient accordingly. The important ones are, like you say, C-reactive protein is very, very important. Higher the C-reactive protein, more is the inflammation. So the patient is more prone for the microclot formation and more the lung damage or the organ damages. And the ESR is also very high in these patients. LDH is high. D-dimer. D-dimer, it denotes the presence of fibrin in the blood. The fibrin that is being responsible the formation for the formation of the clot. And then the neutrophils, they'll have increased neutrophilia. And then or the other markers will be PCT will be increased also. And the other two important markers are IL-6 and ferritin. This IL-6 is nothing but interleukin 6. The important cytokine in this is interleukin 6, which is again responsible for microclot formation because of inflammation. There's severe inflammation of the blood vessels, resulting in the stagnation of the blood and increased content of the fibrin in the blood, and these two causes the microclot. So whichever organ undergoes this, wherever the microclots are present, if it is present in the brain, the patient will present with seizures. If it is in the heart, with the cardiac arrest, or in the renal system, kidney failure. So that is the importance. These are the importance of these markers of COVID. They are called as the pro-inflammatory markers of COVID, or the prognosis of the disease or the severity of the disease is based on this. Once the patient is well hydrated or well oxygenated, you can see the level of these markers, it's going to be decreased. So comparatively, you can make out whether the patient is going in for the severity of the disease or the patient is getting cured from this cytokine storm. So the 5th to 10th day is the most crucial stage of this disease. If their inflammatory markers become normal, you can always see that the patient is reverting back to good health and there's no microclot formation in their system. So these all these markers, they denote this inflammation and microthrombi in the capillaries. So this
Thank
is
you.
about the importance of inflammatory markers. So these tests, they had to be done simultaneously. The RT-PCR test for the detection of antigen, if it's not available, either the TrueNAT or the CBNAT. And if then the next thing is be your radio diagnosis, CT lung or a lung X-ray of the lung. And the next will be your laboratory diagnosis with the inflammatory markers. So these three things are done simultaneously to know the situation of the severity of the disease.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. It was really a great
Yeah.
explanation, ma'am. Thank
Yeah.
you. Ma'am, so the
Thank you.
next question is the second part of our topic, that is about the
Yeah.
vaccines, ma'am. So,
Mm.
as I said earlier, first when people were very happy that the vaccines have arrived, so finally they have a relief from the pandemic. There was a conspiracy, media people, they were seeing the vaccines are very dangerous. And to a
Yes.
common man, ma'am, generally to take a shot is it's very difficult. If an educated person, it's fine. So, ma'am, how do you think? Do you first think, ma'am, that people have some misconceptions regarding vaccines?
Exactly. Thanks for this nice question because usually when you think of vaccination, you always think it's given during your childhood and it is well spaced and it has a booster dose and it has a follow up. So whenever we have thought of vaccination, always three things comes to people's mind, and this is a newer disease. So they might think people will think like how safe is the vaccine and whether I am a right candidate for this vaccination or am I being experimented with this vaccine and what are the pros and cons and am I safe with this? I hope there will not be any long term complication because of this vaccine or which age group should be given because already I have a bleeding disorder or I'm allergic to a certain something substance. Maybe this particular substance is present in the vaccine. So all these things will go in their mind. Also, they're very scared because whether these vaccine might induce corona covid and again they might feel that okay I am a patient with chronic diabetes or with hypertension, already I am having a renal failure. What if this again causes more damage to my health? So these are the questions which runs in everyone's mind, and they might think the front healthcare workers or frontline workers might be in need and why should I need this, or maybe just protection with mask or hand hygiene or social distancing will help me. They'll think that way, and they want the review or the feedback about this vaccination, and they'll wait for others to take the vaccine and see the outcome. So during vaccination, like I mean, there might be immediate complications, allergic, anaphylactic complications, and prolonged ones. So they might have heard of this. Because of this, they'll have this worries. But all these COVID vaccinations are safe because many of them have taken. Now they are used to that, so they're no more scared. But then they'll be thinking, wondering if that booster dose might induce antibodies or it might cause more injuries. So they have a lot of suspicion in their mind about the safety of the vaccines, about the allergic reactions of the vaccine, about the efficacy of the vaccine, and long-term complications of the vaccine. So when people think about all these things, they have that fear, and some of them, yes, they have that misconception that this might cause vaccinations might cause more damage than protection. So, and they also feel that this vaccination might last, like a protection can last for 6 to 8 months or 1 year. So, why should I take the vaccine? So, all these things come to the mind. So, what the answers for all these misconceptions is like if people get vaccinated en masse, like if many get vaccinated, this pandemicity can be reduced to a larger extent. And there are minor and major complications. And when we talk about the complications of vaccines, I'll talk about that. And I think this is about your misconceptions that you have
Yes,
asked.
ma'am.
So
Yes,
I
ma'am.
answered for that question. Yes.
So, ma'am, yes, ma'am. Before moving on to complications, ma'am, who
Yeah.
are the candidates of choice? Like, who are eligible for getting vaccinated, ma'am? Is there any
Yeah.
criteria in choosing the person?
No,
And what
almost
are the
all.
measures they should take before and after vaccination,
Yeah.
ma'am?
Yeah. So there's a certain age group, like initially we used to say like above 18 years of age, everyone is eligible. But why they have preferred the frontline workers are exposed to COVID infection more than the normal subjects. So they were the ones who were preferred in the initial stage. Then adults above 60 years of age who had all the comorbidities like diabetes mellitus, hypertension, and other severe diseases where COVID can cause more damage and it can hasten up all the severity of their diseases. So they thought like they should be vaccinated and protected first. Then the age group of 45 to 60 years, yes, they also have plenty of comorbidities and those are an suppressants or immunocompromised patients or even HIV patients, severe diabetes patients, renal failure patients. So they were also chosen for the vaccine because they need more protection from COVID itself. Because again, this COVID can cause end organ damage in all these people. Then again, what they said, because of the severity of the disease and exposure to this, even above adults or the young adults above 18 years of age, even they should be vaccinated because they are constantly moving in a crowd because of their work or because of their compulsion or whatever. So they have to be vaccinated. But the thing is, there are certain people who are allergic to certain types of vaccines. Like if you take Covishield, there are many people who are allergic to histidine, that's the ingredient of the Covishield. And if you consider Covaxin, people with bleeding disorders or those who are on, those who are on blood thinners, so they need to be cautious. And those who are on, say for example, certain drugs like diclofenac sodium for the rheumatoid arthritis or for the severe myalgia or for some other ailment if they're using, then such people also need to stop those drugs before they start on to this vaccination, because there can be immediate side effects or prolonged side effects, and there can be anaphylactic reaction following the vaccination if they are on this particular drugs like diclofenac sodium or immunomodulators, or that are the drugs taken for rheumatoid arthritis, or on blood thinners after undergoing angioplasty or bypass surgery, coronary artery bypass surgery. So, or for protection from cardiac heart attack or something like that, then they need to stop those drugs and then they have to take the vaccine. And if they're allergic to the histidine or any other known part of the vaccine, any ingredient of the vaccine, if they knowingly know, I mean, they can avoid such a vaccine, go for a different one. So these are the precautions to be taken, and they should not be suffering from the COVID itself, the disease itself, when they're going to get vaccinated. And they should not have symptoms of fever or myalgia when they're chosen to be taken the vaccine, or they should not have any other severe illness during that period. Say, for example, they should not have raised intracranial tension, or they should not have undergone a surgery in a very recent times, like maybe within 2 weeks, or if they have any other. Like what to say, like prolonged antibiotics, immunosuppressants, or corticosteroids, or antimetabolites, anti-cancer drugs. So if they are on those drugs and if they are on those treatment, they better tell the physician that they are on this treatment. And high blood pressure during the vaccination is not also suggestible. So they have to take a BP before vaccination. We should be within the limits, because rise intracranial tension can be there after taking vaccination also. So there are plenty of different types of vaccines are there. Certain vaccines can suit certain people. So you have to choose the vaccine, type of vaccine, and the dose between first and second should be widely spaced, and they should know when to take the second dose. So these are all the things we should keep in our mind before going in for vaccination for COVID.
Yes,
My
ma'am.
recent history of COVID infection, 1 to 2 weeks, prior to this vaccination, that's also not suggestible. At least they should have suffered from this disease 3 to 4 months before they take this vaccination, because they already have their antibodies, IgG antibodies. And if they take the vaccine like 1 or 2 months after they have suffered from COVID, and there can be a hyperimmune response, and that can also lead to cytokine storm. So all these things we should keep it in our mind, and we have to discuss with our physician and then going for vaccination.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. That was a very elaborate explanation. Thank you, ma'am. So,
Thank
ma'am,
you,
so you
Pran.
told when you were explaining about this vaccination, you told there are various types of vaccines.
Exactly.
So, we all know, to a layman's term, all of us know that vaccines are taken from the pathogen itself. So,
Exactly.
in case of coronavirus, it is a virus. So, in what all aspects can a virus be used, or in other words, how can we manipulate a virus to take a vaccine?
Yeah. So this is a very good question. There are different types of vaccines available for COVID now, internationally, nationally. So what they have done is they have used the different parts of the virus in a different vaccination. For example, in Covaxin is the entire virus itself, but it's being inactivated or killed by but the entire virus was being used. Though it's a killed virus, our system identifies it as a live virus or a virus or an antigen, and it starts producing the antibodies, though it's being killed. And similarly, they have used the adenovirus receptor, the chimpanzee adenovirus, the chimpanzee affected with our adenovirus, and that those receptors with spikes are being used as a vaccine in Covishield, because these spikes, adenovirus receptor spikes, which are isolated from chimpanzee, these can induce the antibodies against the spike proteins that is responsible for the infection that is in a Covishield. They also use the protein or the DNA, and they also use the subunit vaccine, and that is one kind of vaccine which is going to come as COVAX. And the Pfizer have used that mRNA part of the virus as the for vaccine, and then for in Moderna also they have used the mRNA and the virus where the protein synthesis takes place. So these are the different parts of the virus that's being used for different vaccinations. So this Covishield is based on that adenovirus receptor spikes vaccine from isolated from chimpanzee, and Covaxin is completely inactivated or killed vaccine that's being safe also. So we have that antigen presenting cells when we these viral vectors or the nucleic acid or induced through this vaccine, and these antigen presenting cells, they recognize this vaccine as a antigen, or it recognizes as a anti like a foreign body. So it presents to the antigen presenting cells, gets processed, and then the antibodies are being formed. But first the first dose, when the first dose of the vaccine is given, it's like sensitizing our immune system. So it's being presented to the antigen presenting cells, and before the formation of antibodies, they are also presented to T cells, which act as memory cells, which starts producing the antibodies at a later stage. But only after giving the second dose, it will be like there will be rapid production of antibodies, and that will be against this COVID virus. If any part of this coronavirus can be used as a vaccine, because it is presented as antigen to our system, and our system can start producing our immune system start producing the antibodies. And also the duration, the first and the second dose, there should be a proper duration the gap. For Covishield, the ideal gap should be like 6 to 8 weeks. For Covaxin, it should be between 4 to 6 weeks for it to get sensitized, and production of antibodies starts only after the second dose, especially 2 weeks after the second dose of the vaccine. If we keep all this in our mind, we'll always know the importance of the first dose and the second dose. And the gap is very important. The duration, the interval between the first and the second dose is very, very important. Suppose the interval is very much shortened, there will not be sufficient production of antibodies. So you have to know how that immune responses. Some of the candidates, they come out with a hyperimmune response, and there's plenty of antibody production even after the first dose itself, but that's rare. But only after the second dose and 15 to 20 days after the second dose, that is 45 days after the first dose, there are production of antibodies, and that can be detected also by ELISA tests, the presence of antibodies, or by CLIA tests. So these are the things, and there are numerous new vaccines which are being formed based on the DNA or RNA extraction of the vaccine, or the protein synthesis, or just from the envelope or from the spikes. So there are 5 different varieties of vaccines taken from different parts of this coronavirus.
So thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for sharing us the knowledge about vaccines, because we never knew actually that all parts of a virus can be used for making vaccines.
Yeah. Or any part of the virus.
Any part of a virus can be used. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So, ma'am, yes, we were speaking about vaccines, and you also said about different types of vaccines. Ma'am. So, as we know, so many countries are working on vaccines, ma'am, but only few have succeeded in that. So, what is your take on this?
Yeah, and the vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, Covishield vaccine, and Covaxin. These four are very popular and very useful with minimal side effects, and there's no dangerous complications of the vaccine. All these four are very safe. But then they wanted to have the in future the nasal vaccine with just nasal spray. Could even induce the antibodies because nasopharyngeal carriage of this COVID virus is the most important one. So they feel the nasal spray itself will destroy the COVID virus present in our nasopharynx. So that is also a type of vaccine, nasal vaccine. I mean, it is a nasal spray vaccine. Just a spray would prevent us from COVID. So that's also going to come shortly. That is also being introduced by our Bharat Biotech. And so this AstraZeneca Covishield vaccine is also very useful because they were the first ones to be inoculated into persons, frontline workers, and there are no long-term complications or short-term complications, no adverse effects seen. So it's also safe. And Covaxin has helped in producing antibodies in sufficient levels. So that's a whole cell vaccine that is also very useful. And then the storage is very simple, just to 2 to 8 degrees centigrade. You can just store this vaccine in the refrigerator, I mean, door of the refrigerator itself. Whereas the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine, you might require, deep freezer, like minus 80 degrees centigrade. It's not easily available in all the places. So that will be the disadvantage. But for us in India, this Covishield and Covaxin has been stored at temperatures between 2 to 8 degrees centigrade. It can be stored in the doors of the refrigerators, or it can be the simple vaccine carriers can preserve these vaccines. So that's the advantage. And this Covishield vaccine should be given earlier. They said can be given between 4 to 6 weeks. The 6 to 8 weeks longer the duration, the better it is for the production of antibodies after the second dose. And Covaxin, it is between 4 to 6 weeks. The second dose should be given. This is very ideal. And there are some vaccines where a single dose vaccine could suffice. Some of them are saying that with Pfizer and Moderna, even a single dose is enough. But Covishield and Covaxin, we require a second dose also. The future vaccines which are going to come in the month of September or October, that nasal spray vaccine, the subunit vaccine, they're all like single dose vaccines. So they are also going to be launched in the future things. So future time. So these are the different doses. Recombinant vaccine with viral vectors, Covishield. But again, there's some recombinant so we are going to have more and more effective vaccines with different administration, route of administration and different also.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Actually, it was fascinating to know that we have a vaccine that can be taken as a nasal spray.
Exactly.
I was surprised.
Yeah, now they are manufacturing that. They wanted to come into they wanted to use it very effectively from the month of September, and that's nothing but that nasal spray because it destroys all the nasopharyngeal what to say that carriage the COVID that's being present in our nasopharynx within few seconds, and that is going to be very ideal and it's going to be very successful. That is the future thing.
Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful
Thank
answer.
you.
So, ma'am, we've been speaking about vaccines, and the reason why we choose you for this topic was because you're one of the most achieved person in the field of creating vaccines. And also, when it comes to bacteria, we heard that you like pneumococci the most. Why do you like
Yeah.
pneumococcus?
Yeah. So Streptococcus pneumoniae is the very commonest cause of pneumonia in children under 2 years of age. Not only pneumonia, it also causes meningitis. And the most important cause of meningitis under the age of 2 is because of Streptococcus pneumoniae. And moreover, it also causes otitis media and septicemia. So these important infections which are caused even by other bacteria, but Streptococcus pneumonia it stood first in causing these infections. Apart from your Haemophilus influenza type B, and then your Neisseria meningitis, that is a meningococcal infection. So all these three were the leading causes of pneumonia and meningitis, especially meningitis in children under the age of 2. So this Streptococcus pneumonia has got 92 variant serotypes. So out of which either 23 to 26 are severely the important causes of pneumonia and meningitis in children. Not all 92 are are virulent or it does not cause pneumococcus invasive disease, the PID. Pneumococcal invasive disease under 2 is caused by certain serotypes which are highly susceptible to pneumonia. So those serotypes were being isolated or the same level pneumococcal this vaccine, I mean, earlier we had PCV7, that is pneumococcal conjugate vaccine 7, and PCV10, but the PCV13 was found to be more efficient along with pneumococcal polysaccharide vaccine 23, which involved the 23 serotypes also. But the PCV13 is very, very popular and very useful to prevent the pneumococcal invasive disease. And this was had a very popular study through ICMR. This ICMR project, they involved almost very important, all the 6 important children's hospital in our country. And whatever study we had contributed was given to our Johns Hopkins. They were also involved in this vaccine. And our for manufacturers like Pfizer. So they had involved all the government hospitals to isolate these serotypes. And they included these virulent serotypes of pneumococci in this pneumococcal conjugated vaccine PCV13, and it was found to be very effective. So the nasopharyngeal carrier study also was conducted in all these children in all the government hospitals. They found that this pneumococci was being harbored in the nasopharynx of children under the age of, but those who were vaccinated were free from this nasopharyngeal carriage of Streptococcus pneumoniae. So that was septicemia because of Streptococcus pneumoniae was found to be almost negligible in the children who had received this pneumococcal vaccine. So the severity of the disease and the incidence of the disease also had come down. So Prevnar, this is the pneumococcal conjugate vaccine 13 that's popularly used along with our pneumococcal polysaccharide vaccine 23 to prevent this disease under the age of 5. Those are not vaccinated under the age of 2 with this Prevnar 13. They have been inoculated with PPSV 23 also. But this Prevnar 13 along with PPSV 23 gives a complete protection under the age of 5. This pneumococcal polysaccharide conjugate vaccine was really a grand success after all this ICMR project, which involved the serotypes of Streptococcus pneumoniae like 1, 2, 3, 5, 6A, 6B, 19A, and it had also involved other serotypes like 13A. And because of this, these serotypes were only responsible for meningitis and pneumonia in children. Not all the 92 serotypes that is present in strep pneumonia is virulent or is disease production. I mean, it's responsible for the disease. So this is called as a pneumococcal invasive disease protection by Prevnar 13. It's a very important vaccine also.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so
Thank
much, ma'am. Incredible to know that you worked on a vaccine
Yeah, because I
I
worked on this vaccine, you wanted to know exactly about the importance of this vaccine. So we all, many microbiologists, those who all worked in children's hospital were involved to identify the serotypes from the samples like CSF of meningitis children and pneumonia, from the bronchial lavage because they cannot produce sputum on the children and the blood culture that showed the septicemia because of strep pneumonia, and these were grown on blood culture plates. These isolates were sent for serotyping through microarray technique and PCR. And these isolates they found were responsible for the infection, and this was involved in the vaccine, our conjugated PCV vaccine 13 or Prevnar vaccine. So that is
thank you,
about
ma'am.
that vaccination. Thank you, Karan.
Yes. So yeah, this is again a very funny question, but actually not intended to be funny. The
Yeah,
thing is, ma'am, for the past 1.5 years, maybe,
yeah.
um, what is the most commonest word you've been hearing?
commonest word. Okay, to prevent this pandemic, regarding this pandemic, you always
Yes.
will be talking about COVID and its protection, and you will say the three important things. Yes, the three important C's contact, like contact with our own cells, like avoid touching your own men, in the sense mouth, uh, eyes, and nose, because the spread is very fast to conjunctiva and mucosal membrane. So why should we avoid touching this part? Though that's a mode of spread of any infection in a very rapid manner, because our hands might not be clean. So hand washing is very important, and you can wear, in order to prevent touching this part, you need to wear a mask. So
Mask.
after wearing mask, you should not move the mask and should not keep touching. So hand washing, wearing the mask, and social distancing. All these three C, like C, avoid contacts, and one more C, I mean clean hands, and the other C is cover your mouth, ears, and nose, and mouth, eyes, and nose. So eyes you cannot cover. So eyes you can wear goggles if you are working in a very closed environment with this COVID patients, or if you're working in a lab. But no, at least mask if you wear, you will cover your nose and mouth. So and you will not spread the infection through droplets also. So this avoid touching men means you should not keep touching your own mouth, eyes, and nose, because you can spread the infection through your hands. That is the main thing. And hand washing at least 4 times a day. If you're not going out, still is very useful with soap and water, because I told you this virus has got a lipid envelope layer. It's a that's easily destroyable by soap and water. Only when there's no availability of soap and water, then you have to use your hand sanitizer, which is made up of isopropyl alcohol. So these are the important things. Though you are vaccinated, don't think you are protected. You might be you are protected for your own self, but you might be the carrier of infection if you is shedding the virus, and you can spread it to others. So please continue to wear your mask, continue to wash your hands, and continue to maintain the social distancing, because there are also the mutated strains, newer strains also. So though the vaccination is going to produce antibodies against all the strains, the new mutated strains, but still avoidance is better. Continue to wear your mask till pandemic stage is over, pandemic city is over.
So yes, thank you
So
so
this is a
much.
picture showing your wash hand, cover yourself with mask and clean environment.
Yes, ma'am. So yes,
Thank you so
so
much.
coming
Any
on
other
to
questions?
ma'am, yes, ma'am. So coming on to the word pandemic, as we were discussing, there were so
Yeah,
many pandemics, ma'am.
yeah,
There were so many pandemics we have studied.
yeah,
But then, how do you think
yeah,
the mentality of the people has changed to those pandemics and the
yeah,
current pandemic is running? Do you find any changes
yeah.
in the mentality of people between the earlier pandemics and the current ongoing pandemic?
Yeah, there have been previous pandemics regarding so many diseases, especially the recent pandemic was regarding our H1N1. There have been variation of this
Yes.
strain, that is the swine flu, or we should say H1N1 influenza. And then we had the avian influenza with the same assortment of the combinations of H1N5, H1, so the H3N2, different variations of these caused pandemics, that is the influenza pandemic was very popular. But then this pandemic has got a peculiar type, because it is in 1918 we had the previous pandemics. We had small pandemics with like SARS and MERS, I told you. But this pandemic is little more alarming, because people cannot go, they are not easily they cannot go out, and they're afraid of catching this infection in a very peculiar manner or a different manner, or it catches us when we are very little careless. So this pandemicity has really scared people and threatened people, and they know the importance of like keeping that social distancing, maintaining the maintaining the cleanliness, clean environment, and use of disinfectants, covering their face with masks, everything they know. But there were no other pandemics earlier which we had followed it with such severity and with with such fear. But as 1918 also, they had used masks for the prevention of spread of this influenza. So they had the similar scenario, but it was long back, almost exactly a century back, I should say. So the present people have not seen that pandemic. A very few would have seen that extreme and this 1918 and 2021 and 2020, in fact. So there have been a lot of pandemics with other diseases, especially with influenza. That is a recent one which was setting, but we had a vaccine very soon for that, and it also was under control. Now also we have that uh, viral pandemic of influenza, but still this is something which has been prolonged for more than a year or so. But usually pandemic city lasts for about 2 to 2.5 years. So that SARS and MERS was it lived for a very short while and not so prolonged. And the entire earth is now being alarmed because of this pandemicity, is still waiting to clear and leave us. And more research is going on regarding this pandemicity. A lot of trial regarding drugs, vaccines is still going on.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks a lot for your
Thank you.
wonderful session. Ma'am, we have some questions from the
Thank you so
audience.
much. Yeah. Yeah.
So, Ashika, ma'am, Ms. Ashika has asked you, how do
Yeah.
infants present
Okay.
when they are infected with COVID? Infants.
How
How
do?
do infants present
Yeah, how do we
when they
sense
are
when the patient is infected with COVID? Yeah, we
infants, ma'am?
cannot never sense
Especially
any
infants. Especially
in
infants. She's
infants, huh?
asking. Yes, ma'am.
Infants, huh? Infants, huh? Children, okay.
Infants, babies.
In babies, okay. No, usually babies, they are not prone for this COVID infection because they lack the AC receptors in them. But if they are in touch with their parents who have got this COVID infection, and if you feel this signs of pneumonia, like deep breathing, rapid breathing, and difficulty in breathing, then probably because this is a COVID time, then we can suspect COVID in them also. But then you can again do a RT-PCR test in them by taking an nasopharyngeal swab. But the infants or babies will get this COVID infection only if they have a history of contact with their parents who are suffering from COVID. Just like because they won't roam around, or if they are hospitalized, and if the hospital staff
சரி ஏன் காசு
are
வாங்குற வீட்டுல
touching them.
எதுவும் நகைலாம் இல்லையா
Yeah.
அது வச்சு வாங்கலாம் எதுக்கு கடன் வாங்குறீங்க
வேணாம்மா
வேணுன்றப்ப மூட்டுக்கலாம் லோன்
Sorry, this
கடன் வாங்கினா யார் வட்டி கட்டுறது
so
அது வட்டி
that way
கட்டுறது பேங்க்ல
these
போய் கட்டினா அது குறையும் இப்ப கடன் சுத்தி சுத்தி போய்
children during this COVID video is very important.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry for the audio
Somebody's audio
disturbance.
is on. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, extremely sorry for that, ma'am.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Hope I cleared that doubt. Because normally infants will not suffer on their own. Only if they have parents have this infection or the caretaker has the infection, then they might suffer. They might have signs of pneumonia. That rapid breathing, fever will be the signs and symptoms.
Yes, ma'am. So the next question is from Master Abhishek. He has asked about dosage interval, ma'am. He's asking, why has the dose interval between two shots of Covishield has been increased from 4 weeks to 8 weeks?
Yes. Now, initially it was only 4 weeks. Now they increased the duration to 6 to 8 weeks because they feel the production of antibodies is much better if the interval is prolonged, because during the first dose, our immune system just gets sensitized. Then within 4 weeks, if you're going to give the second dose, the production of antibodies and the T memory cells, which has received the signal of production of antibodies, is much lesser. This is, they have experimented. And if they are going to give the second dose after 8 weeks, the production of antibodies is much rapid and it lasts longer for more than 8 months to 1 year. So that is the idea of increasing the duration. If the duration is shorter, the production of antibodies is much lesser And this has been identified by the ELISA test or CLIA test, the estimation of IgG level in our circulation. So that's why they have increased the duration where the antibodies production is much better because our immune system gets sensitized better if the duration is longer.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. The next question is from Miss
Yeah.
Aruni. Ma'am, she
Yeah.
has asked, if suppose a person fails to take the second dose of vaccine,
Yeah.
what will be the complications? So she has taken one dose, but she is
Yeah.
not taking the second dose. So what will be the
Yeah.
complications?
There will not be any complications, but the vaccine will become ineffective because if you're not going to take the second dose, there's no production of antibodies at all. There's not going to be any production of antibodies, and with the first dose, there might be minimal production of antibodies in some way, in a few, but this will not last longer. That's all. It will not produce any complication, but it will become like a useless vaccine. So the second dose is very important.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. That was short and sweet. So, ma'am, the next question is from Mr. Saran. What
Yeah.
is herd immunity, ma'am? How does it work?
Yeah, the herd immunity itself, it means that there's a immunity in a group of people or immunity in a community. So, if this herd immunity has to be produced, a lot of population has to suffer from the disease at a single given time. Even for COVID, there could be herd immunity after many of them get vaccinated because they can disseminate they cannot disseminate the antibodies as such, but the disseminated virus that has gone through many people unnoticed or asymptomatic, they can start the production of antibodies on their own. But still, in COVID, we have not seen much of herd immunity. So only when 90% of the population get infected with COVID, and it is their individual system that has to produce the antibodies. So in case of COVID, because of many mutant strains, different types of strains, this herd immunity is a difficult possibility. That's why we have given importance to the vaccination. So once we are vaccinated, we have this protective antibodies of our own, and this is vaccination induced. But naturally, as such, it was a very difficult task to have herd immunity in this virus because of the variant strains and the short-lived antibodies. So that is the reason. So as such, because any disease that is going to be pandemic, herd immunity is going to really help. So if there is herd immunity, then the pandemic gets over very fast.
And so there are so many questions, but due to shortage of time, they
Yeah,
are
okay,
asking
I'll
only picking
answer
very
fast
few.
second. Yeah.
So yes, ma'am. The next question is from Ms. Sukrit Nanda. There are
Yeah.
several vaccines being developed each day. Is it
Mm.
advisable to take another vaccine which may have been proven with higher efficacy, like the Pfizer
No.
vaccines or the measles spray
No,
vaccine?
if the first dose you have taken Covishield, your second vaccine also should be Covishield. Or if you have taken both the doses of Covishield, again you cannot take a Pfizer vaccine because that might harm your system because it acts in a different manner. Already this Covishield would have produced sufficient antibodies in you. Whatever vaccine you take as a first dose, the second dose also should be the same vaccine. If you're taking Covishield for the first time, second thing should be Covishield. If you're taking Moderna or Pfizer, then but that is not given in India, then the second dose has to be with the same thing. And if you're taking Covaxin, the second thing should be with Covaxin. But this year Covaxin and next year again with the no, that also won't work and that's also not safe. So the second dose and the first dose should belong to the same type of vaccination.
Yes, ma'am. So the final question for the day.
Yeah,
The audience, sorry, so many questions are there, but due to
yeah,
shortage of time.
yeah.
So, ma'am, this is from Mr. Dalish David. What is
Yeah.
the reason behind countries like India being less
Mm.
susceptible by COVID compared to the Western countries?
Yeah. The temperature and hand washing, both the things I should say. Temperature, the colder or the frozen the temperature is, there's a rapid spread of this virus and there's a rapid lung infection. Whenever there's in the moist and, when a moist condition, what happens is a rapid spread of infection in the lungs and that leads to pneumonia, ILI, influenza-like illness, and SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome. These are all like the severity is much more when the temperature is very cold and the multiplication of virus is very rapid in a moist environment and a cold environment. That's why in our country, we are less susceptible and maybe the type of immunity that we show. We produce antibodies very fast. Basically, we are all, maybe some of us are immune or prone for better immunity when this virus attacks us. And the hand washing technique, we are all Indians are prone for hand washing quite often. We have that habit of washing our hands quite frequently. We don't use tissue papers. So that also might be the reason why we are much protected and the disease is less severe in us also.